So welcome to the breakout session on social emotional learning, tension and complement to blended and personalized learning. We want to welcome all of you. We know that this session will have an audience of teachers, coaches, administrators, community, and policymakers. We're excited to have you here and participate in this conversation. I will briefly introduce us. I actually won't go through long introductions, but you'll notice at the end of our slides that we have a tiny URL that you can get to where we'll include the slides as well as a bunch of other resources we've created. And so feel free to learn more about us later. So I'm Dr. Heather Greenhalgh-Spencer. I work at Texas Tech University. I am embedded in the Blended and Personalized Learning graduate program, and I've been working on blended and personalized learning for the past several years. Dr. Jessica Cho also is a professor at Texas Tech University. Sorry, what?
Would you mind to show the slide?
Can't you see the slides?
Only first one. So come to your own personal bio slide.
Can you not see the slides?
You can only see the first one now.
Oh.
It doesn't look like it's in presentation mode.
Yeah.
So we just see the.
Gosh, okay, give me just a second.
No worries at all.
That would be bad. I'm like, looks like I got the slides. Okay, give me just a second. Sorry about that.
No, it's fine.
Yeah, it's funny with the presentation mode in Zoom.
Yeah, okay. Okay, can you all see that now?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. Looks good, full screen now.
Can you see it advanced now?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, fabulous. Thank you for that. Sorry for those technical difficulties. So, as I said, I'm Dr. Heather Greenhalgh-Spencer, Dr. Jessica Cho. We're assuming now you all see the slides. Also is a professor at Texas Tech University and focuses on blended and personalized learning and social emotional learning. So we're excited to hear from him today. Claudia Metza is a graduate student and also focuses on leading blended and personalized learning and social emotional learning within Spring Branch ISD. She is an expert on the application of these two frameworks within the classroom. And so we're excited to hear from her as well. Just a quick agenda. We're going to go through two different frameworks for social emotional learning and blended and personalized. We're going to talk briefly about overlap and tensions. We're going to talk about the application of bringing these two ideas, these two sets of strategies together. We'll also have a quick discussion in small groups, and then we'll end by a large group discussion and takeaways. These right here are the learning outcomes. They're basically exactly what you saw in the handbook and in the link that you clicked on today to know what the overall goal of this is. At this point, I'm going to turn the time over to my colleague, Dr. Jessica Cho, to talk about social emotional learning.
Good morning, good afternoon. I'm very happy to present with my colleague for all the teachers, the leaders, coaches, and all over the country. I just turned on my alarms. I'm going to talk about 10 minutes about the social emotional learning. And, the social part, emotional part, intra kind of personal domain, interpersonal domain, it is very broad, it's very complex. And, a lot of things that we should know more about how we become more productive and happy and healthy, very effective citizen. So the first slide simply say from the UNESCO 2019, we teachers have a moral obligation. That's for sure. Next, please. When you learn more about, most of the teachers in this Zoom session or adult teachers, right now, I believe that most of the state adopted, social emotional learning standard in their curriculum. So this breathing, visual may not be new to you. When I learned this one a couple of years ago, in the conference, it sounds a little bit silly, a little bit like looks weird when you do in the public places. But this is very important. Scientifically, breathing exercise is more like a default exercise for social emotional learning. So simply like 20 seconds, if you do so, whether you're alone or in the public place, you could improve your focus, reduce your anxiety. So while we're presenting, I hope that I'm not going to read all the slide line by line. I want you to keep exercising this kind of breathing exercise. So next, please. Just one point at the bottom. We teachers need social emotional support as much as our students do. Again, I learned a lot about the difficulty, emotionally drained, all the confusion that we teachers are experiencing, particularly this year, online and on campus. So I just want to say thank you, teachers, practitioners, teachers, and leaders. We just want to give you a pat on the back, and we appreciate you're doing for our students. So we also need a lot of social emotional learning strategy as well. Next, please. Okay, so kind of like a more slide. I don't want to rush it through, even it's a 10 minutes, because we need to slow down when we when you try to understand who we are, as an emotional part, understand what other people's do as a social aspect. So 21st century is called the emotional turn. Even Mishira 2017 called it age of anger. This might be radical, so to speak, but we humans now called revolutionary human beings living in online more than offline have a lot of social media community, and then easily make a judgment, easily express our emotions, emojis to others, and there's we more and more not thinking deeply, not thinking slowly, but more quickly express your emotion. So instead of asking by Socrates, know thyself, we should ask, feel thyself, learn thyself, and regulate thyself to be more effective and happy individual. So emotion, a lot of questions we have. I want to get started with emotional intelligence, by Goldman. Next, please. We all know this one in 1994 when this whole world focused on more the cognitive IQ, intelligence part. So in 1994, look at the background of this book when this, emotional, quotient, came out. Children was more troubled emotionally. He observed that the emotional, instability of our students, our children back then. 30 years from then, what do you think about our children these days? Smartphone, we didn't have a smartphone back then with that much emotional disturbance. Right now, it's just amazing. When this is a kind of personal story, but when we had some, car accident months ago, my daughter texted it while in the car, waiting for ambulance. She texted her friend and expressing her emotion, not talking to us, to her friend first. So it's just amazing, quick, emotional expression. So all of us should learn about how to understand your emotion alone or in social context, and how to regulate to be, to find out more effective strategies. So next, please. Okay, emotion. Understanding the nature of emotion itself takes maybe your lifelong, the research project. 6 emotion: happiness, sadness, fear, disgust, anger, and surprise. And then 4 more. Now 27 total. What does that mean? It's a complex concept. It's a compounding concept, so to speak. Out of 6, at least 1, happiness is positive. Surprise, half and half. Present surprise is a good one. Or the other side is kind of depressing one. What about the rest 4 of them? It's pretty much negative. So being happy, being positive is hard. it is not automatically you're given, happy feeling. You have to work on that. We have to understand, we have to work to be happy, and we need the social support to be happy. Next, please. All right, social, a little bit about the social competence theory part. So 3 of them, as far as I'm concerned, social metric approach, social learning theory, social validity theory. The first one is more quantitative approach, collecting a lot of data, make analysis to find out who are rejected, who are accepted it. For those who are accepted it, we assume have social skill. If they are rejected it, we assume they don't. Well, that might be true. The second one, we learned all social behavior from social context, from peers. When they punished, we try not to. When they awarded, we try to do more, right? So those kind of theory. The last one, social validity theory. Each individual is given some kind of ways of validizing, yes or no kind of. Say your parents say something, your teacher say different thing. Sometimes the home, values more prioritize the school, so they do not change. Culturally speaking, the same way. Different culture might have a different priority, different, kind of understanding of social behavior. So these are relatively, say, broad sense of a social emotional, social part of social emotional learning's theoretical framework. So next, please. Okay, I have already a minute. So research-wise, it's all proved. We know this famous, the rocks, the 2011 one. At the bottom, I just pointed it out. My research is more compassion, social emotion, pro-social, behavior. SEL, social emotional ethical learning at Harvard University. So now Yale University, Harvard University, Stanford University, Wisconsin, they have a center for social emotional learning. And then the Harvard University included ethical part, some kind of the moral, ethical, kind of social responsibility. So it's maybe interesting to see how these social emotional learnings develop. Next, please. Okay, stress skill, we need to do this one every day, check with the kid every day. Mood meter is very famous. I think you know that, from yellow to green, happy, mad, sad, and calm. We have to check our emotion more often than not. So next, please. Okay, so these 5, the social emotional standard, which I think Claudia will talk more about this one. Simply say, we have to acknowledge our feeling more. We have to find out the cause of our behavior. We have to find out the when and how. We have to regulate our strategy. This is a very famous kind of default framework by Mark Brackett. Next, please. All right, so a couple of minutes, maybe like one slide. A lot of programs out there, But the bottom line is, it's a long time, 7 months, 9 months, a few years, because it is very hard to teach this complex, social skill, right? But the bottom line is, we can do this one as we pay more attention to emotional aspect, social aspect of how our kids, behave and think and express, and we could help them to be more efficient learner. All right, that's what I have.
All right, I'm up next. And the first thing I wanted to do is actually just highlight some of the strategies and ideas behind blended and personalized learning. But I'll say just right off the bat, one of the ways that social emotional learning and blended and personalized learning reinforce each other is a focus on attention and intention. We pay attention to what our teachers are doing, to what our students are doing, to the environment in which we're working. We have intentions that we set when it comes to creating goals, creating learner profiles, data-driven instruction practices. And I feel like having both structures centering around attention and intention helps to actually buttress each other. There are many different versions of blended and personalized learning frameworks. I'm going to highlight the ones that we have at Texas Tech University simply because it takes from Christensen Institute, Friday Institute, various other research within the field and compiles them into look-fors. but honestly, from a general standpoint, there are a lot of definitions, and they're not necessarily in tension with each other. I will say one of the documents that I have linked in the slides, which again, you'll have access to later, is a document that defines terms. And so what I've done in this document is defined things like personalized curriculum, personalized pedagogy, blended pedagogy, various modalities, and then also given some resources on, first of all, how to define them, and then also some best practices around them. For the purposes of this session, the things that I want to point out is thinking about strategies for what the learner does, strategies for what the teacher does, and strategies for how we create the environment to better facilitate learning in the classroom. One of the things that when we're coming from the learner perspective is, again, we have these 6 kind of spaces or arrays that we evaluate on. And analyzing is, again, getting the learner to be able to get to the point where the learner can analyze their own data, can know and be able to advocate for themselves, to know how they learn best. Designing gets to being able to have goal sessions with a student where the student can be able to say, this is what I need to do next. As I look at my MAP scores, as I look at the district assessment, as I look at my learner journal, which is another stream of data, this is what I think I need to do as they're sitting down with the teacher, and then the teacher and learner together design those pathways forward. Facilitating. I think in general, this is one of the places, facilitating and managing, where from the learner's perspective, it most connects to social emotional learning. That idea of being able to self-regulate, to manage what I do with my time, to manage my emotions, that fits squarely within these 2 spaces. And then monitoring and assessing. Again, from the learner's perspective, not only being able to advocate for the idea of an assessment practice, like this is how I think I can best show my work, I can best show my learning, whether that's multiple choice or a portfolio or a research paper, but also being able to assess the situation. If I'm a student and I'm looking around the classroom and maybe I'm in a station rotation and I know I'm doing a self-assessment of maybe I need to spend a little more time in this station over here, can I ask the teacher about that as a possibility? If I'm more in a personalized context, can I assess what it is that I need to do? Maybe I need to spend more total days on this concept than this other concept over here. From the teacher perspective, again, along the same continuum there, the same buckets, the teacher also needs to focus on analyzing the data, really using those data-driven instruction practices with the full data cycle. That gathering data, which seems to be fairly easy for teachers, especially when we think of the full array of data from state assessments all the way down to learner journals or just interacting with our students, having a conversation with our students, that's still data. But gathering the data, analyzing the data to make meaning of it, and then pivoting instruction, those 3 parts are the full data cycle. And then again, designing, facilitating, managing, monitoring, and assessing get at, again, what is it that the teacher might need to be doing in order to facilitate blended and personalized learning. And really getting at understanding where the students are socially and emotionally, as well as themselves, helps them as they're creating processes for understanding where students are at, understanding what the next step is for the student in the learning. And then finally, environment enriched. This is really a call out to the fact that we learn differently in different spaces. And that can be everything from being in a bricks and mortar classroom to hybrid learning, to fully virtual or fully online learning. And then also even within the classroom, when we're talking about a bricks and mortar classroom, are we talking about flexible seating arrangements? When we're in a fully virtual or fully online classroom setting, we're talking about the difference between asynchronous and synchronous sessions. We're talking about what kind of forums do we put up. We are talking about how do we facilitate group projects within that fully online space. All of that gets at how we create an environment that really helps our students learn. And all of that actually still takes into consideration what are some practices that we can do to support our students in that self-management, in that motivation for those stages. One of the things that as Dr. Cho and I and others have looked at social emotional learning and blended and personalized learning practices, in many ways, they very much theoretically support each other. Both frameworks are student-centered. They both advocate the idea of choice and self-regulation, again, that intention and attention. They focus on self-awareness. It's really difficult to have student choice and student voice. It's really difficult to even have a say in path, pace, time, and place unless you have a sense of self-awareness. And social emotional learning can actually facilitate a greater sense of self-awareness. They both help in framing goals. One of the things that I think has definitely become more robust and more practiced within blended and personalized learning classrooms is a focus not only on academic achievement, but achievement more broadly. You know, are you making new friends? Are you cleaning up your room? Like students are actually guided towards setting goals that are not just academic goals. When there are tensions, and sometimes there are, it's usually about like a value judgment, like which takes higher priority. With blended and personalized learning, there's definitely a strong focus on data. And so I've visited classrooms where there's the sense of, well, the student says that, you know, this is really important for them. They really want to be able to draw more pictures as their method of assessment, and that's really important. And that, you know, helps with them feeling emotionally centered. And then blended and personalized will say, well, that's good, you know, student voice is important, but the data suggests that the student needs more practice on writing. And so the data in general takes pride of place compared to what the student says they think they want. And that is one of the tensions, not only within blended and personalized, that advocates both for a focus on data and a focus on student voice, but especially when you're trying to use a social emotional learning framework that really focuses on that student's ability to say, this is what is best for me, and then a BLPL focus on data, data, data. BLPL has a stronger emphasis on managing the self. Social emotional learning definitely focuses on that, on self-regulation and self-management, but I would say blended and personalized, because there is such a strong focus on student ownership of the process, student choice within the process, there really is a strong focus on for a teacher to be able to trust the student, for that to become a normalized process. The student has to exhibit that management of the self. Whereas I think social emotional learning, while they do focus on managing the self, there's also this sort of sense of managing emotions and managing relationships. And so it's not that they're against each other. It's just that in the real world space, sometimes which takes pride of place, which you prioritize first, can come in tension with each other. And so one of the things that we're wondering about from you, if you were willing to verbalize or put in the chat, our suspicion is that many of you have actually worked in blended and personalized learning spaces or are using social emotional learning. Do you see overlaps or tensions, and what strategies have you used? You could take a moment to either verbalize out loud or type in the chat how you are seeing those tensions or those overlaps, and or give examples of how you brought these into your educational context. That would be great. What are your thoughts? This is where it's like wait time. Any thoughts on this? Anything you want to share? Yep, I agree with that. Especially if they don't know where their data is coming from, it's really difficult to exercise that student voice. All right, well, maybe you'll have more to say when we're in the small group room. I know sometimes that happens. Oh, and yep, and Hope says, yes, a lot of times there is definitely overlap. You're still learning strategies, and yet we're actually going to get to some strategies for sure. Tensions around the technology impact. That's interesting too, I think, Stephen, especially when some people think of blended learning as technology focused. I think I'll say in general, the research that I've seen in the schools that I've been in, while technology is definitely present, it's seen more as a pedagogical intervention than a technological intervention. But I can definitely see how if it becomes basically nothing more than give a kid an iPad and make them use software, but that could definitely push against social emotional learning. Yeah, and Eugenia talks about setting goals. I think that's great. Yep, agreed, Stephen. All right, and on that note, we're gonna actually look at how they're applied in the classroom from Claudia. Take it away, Claudia.
So I'll take it away from here. Thank you, Dr. Greenhill and Dr. Cho. So I've been putting practice into the SEL and the blended learning and personalized learning for the past 4 years. In our district that I'm currently residing in, we were a district of innovation for a while, and then we recently had a refocus on numeracy, literacy, and the SEL of students. So I'm going to give you a little bit of background of where I'm coming from to where I started implementing and blending both of these. So when we first started with the District of Innovation on our campus, our 5th grade team started with the Summit Learning schools. So we first understood the science behind it. We were able to apply that, reconstruct our curriculum based on what district had to offer, align it to how we were going to develop it for the whole year. So that took a lot of work. And we were able to understand different components, the 3 pillars that were mentoring, the learners first, and real world scenarios. So we shifted from Summit Learning because for our reasons that they had for us. And now I currently use a different LMS, which is It's Learning. Want to keep in mind that even though it's Summit Learning, It's Learning, Schoology, any LMS that's out there, at the end of the day, the whole purpose is to have student agency for our learners. We want to be able to apply that with the same components and the same framework that what it is blended learning and personalized learning, but also not adding the SEL component of the social and emotional learning with our students. So one thing to keep in mind, every child matters. Every student has different learning needs. Every student has their story to tell, and every student has a voice and wants to be heard. So how did I apply that into my classroom? So we could go ahead into the next slide, Dr. So one of the things that I want to point out is that we've used, with Summit, we use the 16 Habits of Success. But with that as well, our district uses the Kcell 5 components and ASCD as well. So all of this comes together and we blend it into customizing our students' learning. How do we actually reach out to them? How do we have their social awareness, self-awareness? All of those components have to be considered. But in order for that to happen, teachers have to understand how to implement them. We have to be very social aware of it. We have to have self-awareness of what we're delivering. It all starts with the teacher. So if teachers are not self-aware, don't understand their SEL, then it's going to be difficult to push that out to students. So understanding the SEL component and then understanding the PL and BL component and how to mesh them is going to be hard at first. It's not going to be easy. Teachers are going to be having high alerts, tensions. They're going to be all over the place. But once it's broken down into its components, how we have to compartmentalize everything, how we're looking at data, how we're looking at student reflection and ownership, what is the targeted instruction, and what tools are we using? As Dr. Greenhill earlier said, that a lot of the times computers are being, or electronics are being seen as the replacement of teachers. That is not true. We need to understand that it's a tool. And just because we're doing blended and personalized learning, we're not on the computer the whole time. It has to be meaningful. It has to be impactful. And a lot of the times we don't need technology to make that happen. So with that being said, I'll go ahead and showcase some other things that I've done in the classroom. So the biggest one that I want to highlight right now is mentoring and building relationships with students. I think that's the biggest component of how not only SEL drives itself, but also how we build that student agency and having kids become self-aware. The idea of a mentor for teachers is we're not facilitators, we're not their friends, we're not their counselor, we're strictly their mentor. So a mentor is someone who acts and advocates for both sides, inside and outside of the classroom. A lot of the time students want to be heard. They don't have that connection at home. Or one of the things that we tend to see, teachers are the one person that they always want to relate to and confide in. But if we don't step back one moment to say, let's pause this. I know we're here to be educators and teach them, but what are we really teaching them if we don't truly understand what the students' social emotional learning needs is? So what is a mentor? It could be pretty much anybody in the school building, a teacher, a counselor, the librarian, the music teacher, the custodian for that matter. Anybody could be a mentor. It's just how are we impacting that student to have them speak their voice and actually just share their thoughts. And one thing I wanted to highlight is the idea of a mentor is for students to trust and share their glows and grows throughout the process. So if we don't allow students to share their failures and their highlighting experiences that they've done well, then we're not really being true mentors. We're just kind of being listeners and just letting them flow on their own. So a mentor is to support the student's needs, whether it's low standards, high standards. We're there to listen, but also to have them see different points of view, not just one-sided view. We could go to the next slide, Dr. Greenhall. So during mentoring, again, as I was using the Summit Learning Model, I was able to do mentoring a lot easier. We had time set aside to where I could meet with students, at least 3 to 4 students a day. During this time, I was able to do, check on their agendas, be able to set up goals. A lot of their goals are set up around SMART goals, which is, we look at it through 2 lenses. We look at it through the academic, but also personal. And we also look at it through short-term goals and long-term goals. And we want to make sure that these goals are attainable and also reflective back on the student, not so much on the teacher, but what the student's needs are. And also during mentoring, we conversate. Our sessions go no more than 10 minutes because then we start going into counseling, and that's not really our role. We want to be mentors. We want to just be kind of quick. Let's touch base. How are we doing? Check in with me. Do you need us help in what area, kind of thing. And then we also review past in check-ins. There might be days that students might say, today is not a day that I feel like checking in, I'm okay. But then there might be other weeks where the student might say, I need to check in with you today. And then 2 days later, I need to check in with you again because I have this recurring problem or something is setting me up. And students slowly start becoming self-aware of that. They start reflecting and they start asking for that support from teachers. So how do we push that out to students? And I could showcase more on that. So on the next slide. One of the things that I've implemented, and I've shifted to different ways because in Summit Learning, they have the platform where we could do the continuous check-in. Everything that we type in, it's all highlighted there. It's Learning could do the same thing with me. So other ways that I've kind of done as well with my students is doing mental health check-ins in the morning. Something that it's not technology-based, but something that they could do with a sticky note. I have a poster similar like this out, and they pretty much grab a sticky note, they put their name on the back so that way it's confidential. They're not really sharing, because a lot of the times we want to create that safe environment for our students. And that's a big thing about when we're doing mentoring. We have to set that culture in our classroom. We have to set that risk-free environment because if not, our students are not willing to open up. And more than so, they're not willing to share and really let us into their lives and their needs. So a lot of the times when students are doing great, I'm okay or meh, it's like it's a quick high five. I'm glad that you're doing good. But I really do check in with those kids that are saying, I am struggling. I need your help. I'm already in a dark place, because those students are crying out for help. So how do I assist them? It could be during class time. It could be during lunchtime. It could be during recess. There's different times that we could be mentors to these students and also find out more about them. At times, students don't want to help out. They don't want to open up. They don't want to talk. So how can we do this? How can I get to know more about my students? So in one of the other pictures, I also have the same thing, and it's digital with the mental health check-in. The students pretty much type it in. They let me know. And then one thing that I started doing more to just get to know my students even more, especially during these virtual times, is having them do quick writes, either in the chat box, privately to me, or through Padlet, through the It's Learning discussion board, whatever LMS you have available, or tools that now we know as educators, there's so many, there's an abundance that we just want to try to narrow it down to a few. I asked something as simple as, what is the best thing about getting older and why? These are questions that kids don't really get asked, but they do wonder, if when I get older, this is what I want to do. Or it could be like, talk about a time that was a difficult decision for you, or anything that will get the student to express their feelings and their emotions is a way that can move us forward in understanding where the student is coming from. So we could go ahead and go to the next slide. So I want to highlight both of these as my campus currently is doing the Leader in Me with Stephen Covey, the 7 habits that promotes the leadership for students. So how do I take that into my classroom? Well, a lot of that, it's also teaching the kids to be proactive, beginning with the end in mind, putting first things first, but I have to be able to model that for my students in order for them to actually execute these habits. And I know I saw somewhere earlier, someone mentioned the 16 habits minds, or 16 habits of success, which is what Summit Learning uses. And it's the same thing. It's driving the student to become a self-directed learner. All of these are just great components of SEL that we could push through academics. This is just one part of it. So now how do we apply it to the blended and personalized learning? We could go to the next slide. So here's an example that I've done in the past, or other colleagues of mine have done in the past, with self-directed learning activities. The example that we're looking here is pretty much a self-contained classroom where they have various subjects like math, science, and reading. But also the teacher in this situation, she takes time to meet with their students and mentor with them. But one of the things we have to understand, this is choice. At this, there's assigned time for students to be working on choice that they would do. If they want to work on math, if they want to work on science, reading, that's where the blended and personalized learning kind of takes an approach. There is targeted instruction available, but the students have more of a choice of what they want to do. We could also have differentiated activities for them. The other part is having those expectations in place for students is an importance, because a lot of the times students don't understand and don't have that self-awareness of this 30 minutes to an hour, I have to focus on academics. I can't be playing around and talking with my friends because I think it's free time. At the very beginning of when we're launching a BL or PL classroom, it takes a while for students to understand it, especially at the younger grades. Middle school and high school, it's different. They have a different mindset. They've been probably exposed to it. They understand that grades matter more, that their time management, but even then some still struggle. At an elementary level, which is where I'm coming from, we have to model that. And it is a gradual process that as they're going through it, that they start learning. So that's one example for us, a self-contained classroom. The next one, the next slide, Dr. Greenhill, will be, it's also self-directed, but this is more on one subject. And this is my classroom, for example, for I do more of the lesson objective. It's more TEAC oriented, but they have activities that they have but also they have to do a diagnostic, they have to do note taking, they have to practice, they have checkpoints throughout time that they have to practice and self-reflect. So all of this is just different components of how we can integrate it. But at the same time, I am doing mentoring during these activities and checking in with my students to make sure that they're doing their curriculum, but not only that, checking them as a person, as a student, because even though personalized and blended learning, we do have a lot of data and we can, talk about a student as numbers. We also need to remember they're students, they're humans, they have feelings, they have thoughts they want to share out. So we have to combine both of those to make sure that we're giving the best instruction to each student, not just as a whole group, because each student is different. Each student has different needs. And overall, they all have their wants and their different learning styles, which is what, Dr. Greenhouse Spencer was talking about, and even Dr. Cho, that's how we combine them both in the classroom. So in the next slides, you'll see some just teamwork, collaboration, the flexible sitting. You can see how they have computers available, but they also are disconnected by working on hands-on activities. There's projects. So all of this is happening during our classroom instruction. It's not just go for it and there you go, you're free for all kind of thing. It's not. So those are some examples. And then the next slide is the group assignment.
That's right. So we want to set you up to kind of think about strategies that you might use together. And simply because we did not have a sense of how much background information or experience the people in this breakout session would have with blended and personalized learning strategies or social emotional learning strategies, we thought we'd take just a minute or so to talk about a few of the strategies that you might want to think about combining as you talk together in a small group. So for BLPL strategies, one of the things that we focus on, that we say, this will help not only with motivation and self-regulation, but it helps really drive that ability for the students to have choice in their path, pace, time, place, to be able to personalize to the needs of the students. We create learner profiles where we ask students, tell us about yourself. How do you learn best? What is your favorite subject? What ways do you best showcase your work and your learning? We do goal sheets, and we encourage students to write their own goals, students to work with peers on goals, and students to have one-on-one time with the teachers on goals. We advocate for one-to-one student-teacher meetings. We also advocate for student-led data meetings where the students know their data about how they did on the last exam, how they're understanding the current concepts that are being taught, that they can say, this is what I'm doing well, this is where I'm growing, that I might need some help, this is where I'm struggling. Then being able to have the student advocate for themselves, understand where they're at, understand and be able to articulate the help that they need is really what we're aiming for there. The same thing with the goals conferences. Student learning journals are an integral part of really robust and rigorous blended and personalized learning classrooms because data is so key. And understanding that data is more than just quantitative, formative, or summative assessments, but that it also comes down to students writing about their learning, students keeping their journals. That's also valuable data that we use to then pivot instruction. Student aspiration boards, again, really thinking about the fact that we're focusing more than just on academic achievement. And then group projects that are guided both by data, both by what are the needs of our students, but also by desires. If a student says, I really want to learn more about black holes, are there ways that we can integrate the writing assignment and the math assignment and various other standards that students need to learn into an assignment on black holes? So it gets at those choices. And then Jessica is going to do social emotional learning strategy.
Okay, thank you, Heather. Social emotional learning strategy, there are tons of different strategies is out there. What you see just some of the example from the breathing activity, mindful meditation, like a physical movements, feeling or self-talk, all the way down to compliment tag, talking about the positive aspect of your peers and others, understanding, showing your empathy to others, and et cetera, et cetera. But the bottom line is, in elementary classroom, as Claudia mentioned there, teacher might have some control of the time assignment, but the secondary teachers, you have to, specifically design some of the, activities, say, in terms of the SAFE principle, say, anything you do, in the context of a social emotional learning should be consequential, active, focused, and explicit. Okay, it's not just like doing one time and then move on to next one. You will never do it again. You have to, do in such a way that you regulate and the students can develop their own sense of controlling their emotion, understanding others' emotions, and then find out the health social relationship. So next slide, please. So again, this could be one example. Heather seems to like it, so I'm going to show it to you. So this is one of my favorite kind of narrative assignment for social emotional learning. Say there are scenario kind of writing up, even like a share and talk and share context. What happened to it? What the cause? When did it happen? How I can do better, and then future strategies. So there are many strategies you already implemented in your classroom, but it's time to think this BL and PL more structured but flexible. Social emotional learning is more flexible, but you should be structured. So try to find out this intra and the inter personal relationship into one cohesive academic plus emotional lesson plan. So that's all.
Okay, at this point, we're going to do 8 minutes rather than 10 to 12 of a small group assignment. So I will automatically divide you into small groups. When you get the little notice that says, you're being asked to move to group X, please click yes so that you're able to move. In your small groups, you're going to talk about 2 things. Basically, are there strategies that you use in SEL or in BLPL that we talked about in your own educational context? And maybe you don't use them already, but there are strategies that you could use. So kind of develop your own list of what strategies you might be able to use, and then talk about why you would use those strategies. All right, so if you give me just a second, I'll divide you into groups. And again, about 8 minutes to talk about these 2 questions. Again, strategies that you use and why. Just a second. And then Angelique and Jennifer and Chris and Lindsay, let me know if you need help moving.
Heather,
should be-
we are, oh, sorry. We are multitasking, so we're in the room together, and we should have told y'all that. We teach with Miss Meza, so.
Oh, got it. Okay,
All right.
perfect.
I was in midstream talking to my team and clicked on the exit button by accident. Oh, well,
No problem. We're all coming back. So
well, I'll go back to mute. Thank you for this, by the way. It's been really fascinating.
oh, good. I'm so glad. Well, all right. In about a few more seconds, more people should be back. So I'll ask you, I'll just focus on question 3. What did you learn from the peer group activity? What are your thoughts? Again, sharing verbally or in the chat. So what did you learn from the peer group activity? Anyone willing to share out?
I suggest Kim.
You're voluntolding.
Voluntarily, you have a good idea. So good kind of sharing point.
You willing to share, Kim?
I'm Kim Loomis. I'm from Las Vegas, Nevada. And what we talked about was how in the early days of the remote learning, I think that we really focused in on the SEL more so than we have as we've come back to remote learning here in the fall. I think the focus has been less SEL and much, much more academic, which is disheartening.
Yeah, I think that's true. In fact, I'm on part of a team with TEA where we're coming up with resources. And one of the things that came up that a lot of people didn't expect was the idea of we need more mental health resources. As a lot of students are dealing with loss of grandparents, loss of friends. I mean, there's like trauma has been inflicted. And so without getting at some of those mental health and social emotional learning resources, we're actually doing our students a disservice. So I really agree with that. Anyone else? Anything else that you want to share out that you learned?
I just want to say, Kim, that's a really good point because social emotional aspects of the classroom are way, way more apparent and important now than they ever have been. And it's hard because people are getting distracted from that.
Yeah. Good stuff going on in the chat as well, but I want to kind of keep us on time. So I just actually wanted to focus on where we won't have time for these questions, but just take a moment to think through what you might have learned that you didn't already know, and also what you still want to learn. Hopefully this spurs you on to doing some more research on your own, and then thinking about your biggest takeaway from the session. We're also including these tiny URLs. I don't know if you want to snap a picture, but they include both the slides with resources linked within the slides, as well as one where we're actually dumping some resources that you might be able to use in your own educational context. With that in mind, we'll just kind of give you that in the chat box, the survey to take at the end of this session, and then also a link to the keynote that begins in about 15 minutes. I wanted to thank you very much for your time here. Really appreciate it, and have a wonderful day.